Okay, let's work on rendering the mouth and a little bit of the beard and mustache. As requested, I'd like to show and demonstrate working with the beard. So to get started in those goals, let's work with the mouth first. And so I'm going to use this is actually broken off lead from my charcoal pencil just because it fell on the floor. So I've stuck it in this small charcoal holder. But this is Wolf's Carbon. This is a Wolf's Carbon 4B that I've got, but a 2B will work fine. 2B would be probably preferable, but I'm going to start by working in the dark accent of the opening of the mouth. And it may work out, I don't know for sure yet, but it may work out that that the upper lip, which is sort of created by the Vine charcoal poster from before, it could work out that that's just left behind as is. Sometimes you have opportunities for that to happen, and that's welcome when that happens. Just letting the poster value perform its duties, and create the the end effect of an area that you're rendering. So what we have here is a cast shadow from the upper lip, which is falling over the lower lip. When we think about cast shadows, it's good to think about them out as a cross contour. So it's the shape of the upper lip falling across the lower lip, but it falls in a way that wraps over the forms of the lower lip. So it's an opportunity for us to show the form of the lower lip. But really, a cast shadow can perform that way anytime we see a cast shadow, whether it's in the portrait or in the figure. Cast shadows in the full figure have historically been used that way. They cast shadow wrapping over an arm or a leg or across a torso. The shape of the edges of that cast shadow, like this, are used to clarify and amplify the forms that it passes over. Trying to see how this there's a vertical moment here, a sort of a dark edge that's sort of vertical about here, and I'm trying to find where it would be plumb. What point on the face would it be plumb to? So I'm just going like that with my pencil to try to drop this dark shape into the right position. Now, when we start to approach working with the beard and the mustache, squint your eyes. Squinting is one of the most powerful techniques that we have for drawing and painting in a realist manner. When we squint our eyes, and we're squinting when we look not only at the model, but we're squinting while we look at our drawings too, and going back and forth as we look back and forth at both things, the drawing and the model. Things are simplified, but they're simplified in a special way. They're simplified into their most important elements. So the squinted vision seems to edit and filter out extraneous details, and it also seems to connect and unify values into big common shapes and big groupings of tone. So we can assess whether we are also making those same groupings and patterns when we squint. So even as I lay down the charcoal right now, my eyes are squinted together. And that means my eyelashes are actually clashing together and creating a screen over my eyes, over my eyeballs, and allowing me to receive the benefits of that squinted vision. And now I'm using the brush to blend the charcoal pencil, keep it from being grainy. Just working it into the paper a little bit. This is a little bristle brush. The brand was Connoisseur number 2. I chopped it in half. It was a long handle brush, but I chopped it in half so that it would fit in my drawing case. The bristle brushes work really well for blending the charcoal. There's been some conversation about that recently, and how blending with a sable brush or a synthetic sable brush like this one, where it's very soft, sometimes that actually, it can blend, but it also almost feels like it's erasing value, like it's lifting up the value. It's making it a little bit lighter as I blend. So it can have a good application, but every time you pick up a brush to blend with it, be aware that it's going to create a different effect as we go from different types of brushes that we could use from different shapes, but mostly from different materials of brush, where we have bristle versus sable or synthetic sable or any kind of softer brush hair. So it's hard to know what to do in here. As we start to get into the mustache and the beard, it's very chaotic. And the photograph shows a lot of detail there and a lot of individuated hairs. So the secret to working with any hair, that includes beards, it includes eyebrows, mustaches, hair on the head, is that you want to ignore all of that finite texture. And you want to squint your eyes and look to see what the larger, simpler patterns are. And so I often talk about how to do hair in my figurative classes, and I start with sort of a crass phrase. When people say, "How do you do hair?" I always say, "You do hair by not doing the hair." And the students kind of look at me quizzically. But what I mean is that we're not getting into the texture of the hair. And we're trying to look for the bigger properties of the hair, the shape, the structure, the value, the planes, the masses of it. And texture would be like an afterthought, and maybe not even ever there. Maybe just we could fully omit the texture and still have a really beautiful outcome. Or we might do the texture very simply at the end for like 1 or 2 indications of hair. But what I want to talk about is I want people to think, when they do hair, I want them to think about how a stone sculptor would have to handle hair in a marble sculpture. And so imagine that you've got a big block of stone and chisels and a hammer, and your job is to carve a portrait out of that block of stone. And of course, we can literally look at great examples from art history where we see a figure or a portrait or a bust of a figure in stone, and they have hair on their heads, they have beards, and so forth. Michelangelo is a perfect example. So for any of his heads of hair, like the David or his Moses, where there's a beard and there's hair on his head, visualize and imagine what he had to go through to make that hair. And it was not, you can be sure that it was not starting with the literal texture of the hair itself. And I say that because that's mostly where beginners tend to want to start with hair, is they want to make individuated textures and individuated fibers of hair with the tip of their pencil. They want to go hair, 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 hair. And then in this kind of drawing with black and white charcoal, they'll pick up their white chalk pencil and they'll start making individuated hairs. And believe me, please save yourself a lot of time, and believe me that it creates a really unattractive result when we treat hair that way. And it also puts all of the attention on the hair when we draw hair that way. So it becomes such a highly textural event that that the viewer is we end up unintentionally creating a demand on the viewer's eye that they look at that texture first and foremost as the primary target of the drawing or painting. And that's obviously not what we want. Now, because I'm squinting, I'm picking up on irregularities of patterns of shape and value. And these are actually the things, these shapes, these values, these patterns. These are the things that convince the viewer that they're looking at hair. It's not the very inconsequential literal fibers of hair that do it. It's looking for these patterns to create and imply the structure of the mustache and the planes of the mustache, and eventually to imply the texture of it. This is really the same lesson I would give for any textural event. My plein air students always want to know how to paint trees and grass. It's the same thing. We're looking at the shapes of values that are presented to us. And we're simplifying things down to big shapes and big values. So I'm following patterns that show up to my eye while I squint and look at him. Notice I'm working with the vine charcoal right now. It's okay to go back in time and work with that vine charcoal again. Especially when we work with a soft, wispy beard, like John's soft, wispy beard. We want to create a poetic feeling that this beard is actually not solid. This beard a lot of it is air inside there. So we can, in that sense, we can think of the beard as kind of like a cloud. We want to invoke some of those cloud-like properties in the beard and the mustache. I fell off track of something I was saying that was important, that was about how a stone sculptor would create hair. And they would create a block, a mass of stone for this beard first, right? Then they would create planes and structure to that mass of stone. They would create an underplane for the mustache and the upper lip. They would create side planes for the beard and front planes, and slowly they would add more and more information, more planar changes to it until the feeling of the beard as a structure and the mustache as a structure began to appear. Then they might subdivide the larger planes into smaller pieces. You know, looking at patterns within the beard or sections within the mustache. Maybe there's planes in the mustache here on John that seem to reinforce the plane changes of the philtrum. This. So the stone sculptor would set about making those the next order of smaller plane changes. And the big point I like to make is the very last thing they would do at the very end of the sculpture is they would take their pointed chisel and they might chisel and carve a few striations of linear texture into the hair, but in a very reserved way. They would not go overboard with it. When you look at great stone sculptures, you don't see a lot of convoluted, hairy texture. You can see they were focused on the bigger form. And of course, the stone demands that. You can't start off by making individuated hairs. Our problem is that we could do that. We can do that. We can take the tip of our pencil, we can take the tip of a brush, and we can start making literal hairs. And it's just really not the way to go. All right, so now that I have a little bit of information built up about value patterns, plane, texture, let's try bringing in some of the white chalk to imply the, well, there's highlights on the lips I want to address, but also there's the local value of the beard and mustache. So the beard and the mustache have a lot of bright white silvery values in them, and we can use our white chalk to imply that. So let's see what happens there. So we're going to pick up the white chalk. And we're going to sand it. I'm going to put a point on it. There's my white chalk, not very sharp. White sanding block. Sanding it by laying it flat on the sanding block. And taking your time to try to put a long taper on the material. Don't press too hard or you'll snap it off. If you snap it off or you drop it, put it in a charcoal holder or put it in a lead holder. Either one works. And I've drawn a lot of portraits of John over the years, and to me, the funnest thing about it is the cloudy effect of the beard, and so, you know, I want to capture that feeling, that cloudiness, and the high value of it, but not the texture of it. If you want to know my secret, that's what it is. So people say, how do you do the hair? And they're going to ask you, how do you do the hair? And you're going to say, you do the hair by not doing the hair. Think of it as a cloud. And I mean, you know, it's not unsimilar to a cloud. It's a lot of what we're looking at is air. There's hairs that are curling and spacing apart from each other. And a lot of what's in there is just air. So we can make sort of a poetic implication that that's what's going on here as well. Now his mustache is tricky because there are local values within the mustache that are the darker fibers of hair themselves. He still has some black hairs hanging out in a mostly white beard. And so the hard part for us is that we want to use darker values to imply shadows. But we also want to, maybe if we can, we want to try to show that the mustache is a dark thing. It's darker than the beard. So we see what we can get away with. So I had a very dark value there that I don't know if I needed that or if that belongs there anymore. It seemed appropriate at one point, but now it doesn't seem appropriate. So this value here, I'm lifting back up to the paper, and I'm kind of trying to create almost an open transition of the beard right into the face. And value, if I squint, the light on the face and the light on the beard right here are pretty close comparatively. Pretty close. It's the same thing over here. I have a really dark value on the side of the face. I'm going to experiment with taking that out and seeing if it was better without it. You know, now that we have this bright white value of hair of the beard coming down, maybe that's more exciting to create the edge of his head that way as opposed to with a line. But we don't really know till we see it. We don't know what's best till we see it. And I'm not opposed to lines. I like linear work in a drawing. I like it when the drawing is made up of both linear work and tonal work together. And the question is where and when. You know, when do we use tonal work? When do we use linear work? And sometimes it's just a matter of doing trial and error. Now we could also, it's worth experiencing at least, creating some texture of hair through subtraction like that, but don't go overboard. You know, try a few textural indications of hair with the subtractive powers of your eraser. It's like salting your food again, just like reflected light. If you do a little bit, it'll kick up the flavor nicely. But if you just keep going, pretty quickly you'll find that you've gone overboard. Now I also have this tool, a mechanical eraser, which you can cut into a nice pointed blade, and you can subtract with that as well. And you can get some pretty interesting effects that way as well. I like this kind of thing where it's sort of counterintuitive that we would do something that stitches across the face, across the mouth, because we think of those lips as being so separate. But what really works in working with the mouth and the lips are things that bind the lips together and not things that separate them. So I'm thinking about using some of these hairs as like an opportunity to go across the mouth. But each time I do one, I think that might be your last one. Don't go overboard. It's not worth going overboard. It's more fun seeing a few magical touches of that and then making it sweet and simple. You can, if you want to see the The argument to that, though, the the disproof of what I just said, you can look at my teacher's work, Stephen Assail. I studied with Stephen in grad school, and he does hair phenomenally, and he gets highly textural with it, and yet he doesn't go overboard, or it doesn't call attention to itself in a problematic way. Anyway, it's very beautiful. So you can see I am putting in texture now, but notice how reserved I'm being and how careful, and how I'm really sort of checking my balance here with how much texture I'm allowed. It's like I'm on a tight budget, and I can't go on a spending spree with the texture of the hair. But I can do a little bit of it. Okay, I'm going to put that eraser down so I can stop myself from doing it. It's addictive. You can quickly do it too much. There was some light on the lower lip to attend to that I haven't really looked at yet. I'm using the brush to try to create a delicate, very moderate value over that lower lip. It's just a little bit darker than the lighter area of the lip. Again, back to the sort of just the joyful expression of the cloudy beard. Just applying the chalk in a really basic way, really simple way. This can make a really nice respite, poetically, in the drawing, where the face is so tightly rendered and made in a carefully analytical way, and then the beard is just this release of just kind of pure joy working with the material. No fear. There's really no right or wrong. Well, there is, but it just feels like you can just let loose. And would you put texture in there? Again, a little bit, yeah. But approach it with caution. Don't go overboard. Look at Leonardo da Vinci's self-portrait in red chalk. It's one of my favorite da Vinci's, is his red chalk self-portrait with the long flowing beard that he did when he was older. He's sort of glowering at you with heavy eyebrows. I copied that drawing many times, starting at about age 12 and 13, and kept copying it over the years. But I remember the way the way he creates textural rhythms and patterns of flowing beard with just very expressive little indications of curls in the beard. So I often think of that. When I'm working with John's beard. It's fun. It's really fun. So have fun with it. You'll notice I'm kind of turning the pencil, the white chalk on its side. I'm pulling it, twisting and turning it as I make these lines in the beard. Those went a little bit awry, so we'll do that. And you can go back and forth when you create the beard. You can try putting some texture in and then soften it out. And then reestablish some texture again. And then soften it and fog it out. And go back and forth between clarity and non-clarity to hopefully find a happy state of where the beard is both feels it feels realized but not overdone. Okay, I hope this points you in the right track for working on the mouth and the beard in your portraits, and you're going to come up with your own way of interpreting it too. But hopefully some of these comments guide you in the right direction. And I look forward to seeing how you interpret it. All right, thanks very much, everyone.